The Gitxsan traditional territories, or Lahip, occupy an area of 33,000 square kilometers in northwest British Columbia. Control of the Lahip is divided into house groups, or WILP. Each WILP territory is maintained as a functional ecosystem that sustains each WILP member and is headed by a chief. It is the chief's responsibility to ensure the sustenance of his WILP members. Harvesting and traditional processing of salmon is central to the survival of the Gitxsan. It has been this way since time began.
The river carries the fish, hun. The fish is our spirit. That's our spirit. People are always saying that they commune with nature. The Gitxsan are like that. We commune with nature. We have a relationship with fish and all the animals and all the land, all the trees, everything. We love them and we want to sustain them for future generations, thousands of generations to come. There's no such thing as downstream and upstream. It's all Gitxsan, people of the Gitxsan. Git means people of, and Gitxsan means the river. The real name of the Skeena River is called Gitxsan, and that means people of the cloudy river.
Within each WILP, the harvesting of salmon is managed by chiefs and wing chiefs at specific ancestral fishing holes called anat along the rivers. Gitxsan laws forbid any WILP member from harvesting or trespassing outside the boundaries of their own WILP without permission. These protocols have always been strictly enforced between the Gitxsan.
My name is Vernon Smith, Hereditary Chief for Eagle Clan. We call it Lachskik. We are on our traditional territory. And the name of the water behind me is called Gitxsan, which means if a canoe goes into the riptide, it sucks it in and they never come back out again. It's pretty strong. So they call it Gitxsan. And the camp just up above me here is called Gitxsan.
This place is quite new to our family. Our original fishing site was just across the river. Of course, CN just built their trucks right through the original camp, so we had to move across the river with permission of chiefs. I began to develop this camp in 2012. We guide our little ones and take young people under our wings and help them fly. My mom used to always tell me when I'd be called up to speak, which means, don't you speak English, you use the tongue that God gave you. And it's all connected to the Lahip, the river, the trees, everything, the animals, and our ancestors. And we practice which means the act of passing down. How did our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents know what they know? How do I know what I know today? Because it was passed on to me. It's our duty. It's almost like law to practice Balhian for the future generation.
Even the youngest Gitxsan child must adhere to traditional law. However, at the fishing holes, the permissions that are granted today are not forever.
People that could use my fishing hole are my children. And they could use it until I'm gone. And then they have to ask permission from my sisters or my brothers that are left behind before they go back onto my fishing area. I can't fish on other chiefs' fishing hole. That's the respect we have each other. And we know each other's fishing hole.
The Gitxsan no trespass laws are not just about mutual respect. They are in place to ensure the integrity and biodiversity of their lahip. Because the Gitxsan live off the land, it is paramount that these laws are enforced, not just amongst their own people, but to everyone who wishes to visit their unceded traditional territory. With the ongoing effects of industrialization and climate change, these laws are in place to ensure the survival of the Gitxsan nation.
My chief's name is Guyes from the Fireweed clan. We're now standing on an area close to our Anat. We call it Anquadish, and that's where the water is in rapids. And there are at least 4 other fishing holes right around the same area that belong to Guyes and our house group.
Hereditary names and ranks, along with their respected fishing holes, are passed down from generation to generation in a matrilinear system. This means that they trace their lineage through their mothers.
We depend on the salmon for our livelihood, for our families. For a long time, the sports fishery, we feel, have had free reign and have fished anywhere they wanted, anytime they wanted. The province issues permits, and these fishermen for $35 can go fishing anywhere in BC. We don't know who these fishermen are. We don't know where they come from. Maybe they mean well, maybe they don't. We don't know. We have kids on the Arnat. We have children, and we have young girls. Sometimes we leave them to tend the smokehouse if we have a smokehouse there, and or walking on the trail. We don't know who is coming. So their safety is another issue that we're considering. But when it comes to going on someone else's territory, we don't do it. We've never done it.
The infamous Highway of Tears runs directly through the Gitxsan Nation. It is ground zero for the dozens of unsolved cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls since the 1970s.
We've always had a vested interest in our territories and had a vested interest in our Anat. We've never ever given that up. When we have our feast halls, our Lilligit, that's like our governing system. That's where we hold our government. What happens there and that is our law.
In 1884, the Colonial Canadian government amended a law notoriously named the Indian Act to ban all feast hall ceremonies. This federal law functioned to intentionally destroy the culture of the Gitxsan along with their traditional laws. In response, the Gitxsan took their feast hall ceremonies underground for 71 years until resurfacing when the Indian Act was amended in 1951.
With the fishing and that's like that's who we are. Like, we live on the fish and the salmon that come up. And it's been like that ever since I was a child. And it's probably been like that for thousands of years before me. There's always been laws put in place by the Gitxsan Hereditary on when to fish and when not to fish. And also there's a law too that you don't play with your food. And that's a big part of the sports fishing in that you're playing with your food because bad things can happen. And if we don't step up in that, then we're just as guilty also in that. And we have to step up and stop that from happening. We have a vested interest in protecting our territories, protecting our rivers. So who better to look after it than us?
My name is Ted Mowat, Samori Jogosle. I took this name in 1993 from the late Walter Wilson, who was Jogosle at the time. He passed away, and we done the settlement feast for him. And at that time I got the name. This land that we stand on is not the Hagelget Canyon. It is called Gitxsan. We had a fishing camp, and a lot of our fishing was done in the canyon. We've been here for many generations. They had a big rock just up the bridge that was blown out by the fisheries, DFO. And this was something that we as a Gitxsan people did not want to see, because there was an area of spawning for the salmon to go upriver. The Gitxsan people are starting to be strong through the Gitxsan governance that's been created by the Gitxsan Treaty Office. What we're working on is dealing across the table with the Canadian government, whether it be provincial or the federal government. What we're trying to enforce in the Gitxsan governance is ownership, and let the governments know that yes, it is our land, it is our Lahyip. And when I meet with the workers from the forestry, the mining, we show them the big map of the 33,000 square kilometers that we do have, and we tell them the boundaries on this map was not drawn by the government. These boundaries were walked by our ancestors, and each boundary inside of the 33,000 square kilometers, there are many different Lahyip owners. When you have the proponents and government come in and say, you can log this, or say, no, you hold it right there, you're trespassing. And the laws of the Gitxsan in the old days, was trespass was a very serious crime. And a lot of them were probably killed because of the trespass. So if you're going over our territory, you'd have to ask permission. And if you got something from our territory, you'd have to give us a portion of that. Our territories are ours. It's not crown land, it's not crown resources, it's ours. And there's something they have to learn.
The chief has a huge responsibility, and the influence of the chief has a lot to do with the success of getting the people back to do what we do with the land, fishing, living off the fish, preparing the fish for winter, preparing the fishing sites, the anat.
While harvesting at their traditional fishing holes, many Gitxsan chiefs were arrested in 1975 for fishing without provincial permits. The fish they depend upon were confiscated and the sites destroyed by armed RCMP officers. This was yet another dark day in Canadian colonial history.
2 years ago, we've had our fishermen charged with fishing. And it just brings you back memories of 1975. So that our people are being charged, and they've got huge fines for fishing, for something that we've always done. So the chiefs have decided now that there's going to be no more trespassing on the Anat. The fisheries tenure belongs to the Gitxsan. The permits that are issued by the federal and provincial government do not authorize trespassing. We're saying no trespassing, you're not allowed to trespass on Gitxsan territory. 33,000 square kilometers. The whole river is closed to recreational fishing. The Gitxsan system is a standard that we've lived by. We call it ayok. You do not trespass on another's Anat. So it's a standard that we live by, and it's all voluntary. And it's self-monitoring, and it's respect. So what we expect here is that the recreational fishermen will respect the idea of the Anat and not impose themselves and not trespass without permission.